Hello, and thanks for tuning in. This video is to make an attempt to help people who may not understand how the sharps and flats and standard notation system work for guitar players. Here I have pictured a keyboard, and I think the keyboard is the reason why we have the sharps and flats system the way it is, in addition to standard notation. They seem to go hand in hand. And I do think that if you're a guitar player who understands, or if you're going to understand fully the sharps and flats, it's good to understand it from a keyboard perspective, because the keyboard is set up where the white keys are natural notes or notes that aren't sharp or flat, and then the black keys are the sharps and the flats. Similarly, in standard notation, notes can be written on lines and spaces, but each line and space is set aside for a natural note only. In other words, there are only 7 note places in standard notation, and then if it is to become a sharp or flat, we add the sharp or flat to the note. There's no specific line or space for a sharp or flat. In other words, this note here is a G note. If I want it to be G sharp, then a sharp would be added, or it would be added in the key signature. Now, the details of reading standard notation are not going to be displayed in this video. The whole point is that the standard notation system only has room, so to speak, for 7 notes. And so, similar to the keyboard, we have 7 notes, and then the sharps and flats are on separate keys. So it kind of makes sense that if you only study the guitar, you're like, well, why the sharps and the flats? For instance, on the guitar, well, let's go ahead and add these notes to the keyboard. I'm going to add them in the right spot here. And we could duplicate this by adding these notes over here. I started on A just because it's the beginning of the alphabet. And when we look at the keyboard, we have A sharp, B, and C. So if you're learning just the guitar and you're like, well, why the heck does B go straight to C? Well, it has to do with the keyboard. Now, that's a good question, why that's B to C, because that doesn't make much of a difference on the standard notation. I'm going to use the right stem direction here. So if this is B and that's C, and that's just a natural half step. So we have to kind of get it through our mind that there are this thing called natural half steps. And the natural half steps occur between B and C, and then E and F. We see every other note has a sharp. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, back to A. Now, if you play piano, you understand this, because if every note had a sharp, you would see this configuration would be white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, and there would be no distinguishable areas on the keyboard. Whereas with this configuration, we have 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. That means every area is absolutely distinguishable. We know that this note exists between the 2 white keys, and these notes, this note exists between the 2 black keys, and these 2 notes exist on the left and the right of them. That's different from the way these look here. Whereas if there was a black key in all of these spots, you would really have to heavily depend on your ear to know exactly where you're at. So then if we add the A to this note right here, or this note right here, the A is always the right side of the 2 white keys inside the 3 black keys. Or one way to look at it is the C is always to the left of the 2 black keys and that's how we get it. And then the octaves just continuously repeat. So we're always going to have B to C as a half step and E to F as a half step. Well, the same holds true on guitar. A goes to A sharp, B goes to C. So that's a C note. C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. But it doesn't have the black and white difference. And so that's just something that guitar players have to accept. Now, with standard notation, once again, we only have space for 7 notes before we go back to the beginning. So A, E, this is E on the bottom line, and this is F, and then, oops, and this is G, this is A, and we have B and C and D back to E, and then so on and so forth. If we wanted to write out all of the sharps along with it, we would just add the little sharp sign. So this continues with the lines and the spaces. And once again, there's only 7 spots for notes. This explains also why certain keys use a sharp rather than a flat in these situations, because we want to have one of each letter name represented, because the lines and spaces are reserved for letter names, not for specific sharps or flats. And so, again, the details of this, I think learning to read standard notation is, if you haven't done it, I think it's useful and it's helpful for understanding the notes at an absolute situation. If you're just a guitar player and you don't dabble in music theory and songwriting and stuff like that, it may or may not be useful. I'm not going to preach on it, but I do recommend learning it and learning it slowly. But the idea here is to explain just why we use those. And so pretty much every instrument has adapted this system of sharps and flats that seems to be most useful to the keyboard and standard notation, but we still talk about it and call these notes that. And yeah, some guitar players don't, they don't do it. They just say 5th fret, 7th fret, they know the positions, this and that. Excellent. Ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to your ear and how well you're able to communicate it. But nonetheless, we use the same system when it comes to understanding the notes. And again, in this example, I used the A string, the open A string, just because it's the beginning of the alphabet, and likened it to where we started on the keyboard. I hope this makes sense. I'm trying to add a few more videos that relate to music theory and understanding the notational system. It can be kind of confusing trying to understand all the notes when you don't know how they relate to the scale and scale degrees. But I think, slowly but surely, if you commit to it, understanding what each note is, there's really only 12 of them. And yes, some of them have different names. A sharp can be B flat and whatnot, but it really doesn't take that long before they're all kind of rooted in your memory. And I think it really helps to understand them distinctually. Let me know what you think. Please subscribe. Give me your ideas. Give me your questions. Maybe I didn't explain this properly. I hope it made sense to some of you. Hope you enjoyed it, and I plan to do more videos soon. Take care.